The shuttle drifted through the silent corridor of stars as Leon sat strapped in his seat, reading the final briefing one more time. His mission sounded simple on paper. Humanity had been locked in a tense border standoff with the Kalari Empire for years, and someone needed to step onto their capital world and propose a treaty. Command had chosen Leon for his patience, steady voice, and calm approach to conflict resolution. He had no illusions about the risk, yet he carried a quiet hope that this meeting would prevent another generation from living under the threat of war. The Kalari had requested a single human envoy instead of a delegation. They believed multiple voices weakened clarity. Leon accepted the condition since it aligned with his own style of negotiation. The shuttle captain informed him that atmospheric entry would begin in 3 minutes, and Leon looked through the glass at the enormous indigo sphere below. The Kalari homeworld shimmered with floating cities and spires that looked like branches of gem, trees reaching toward the sky. After touchdown, Leon walked down the ramp into a hall illuminated by lanes of soft turquoise light. Kalari guards stood in formation. Their armor looked like polished shells, and their posture resembled dancers frozen in motion. A tall figure stepped forward and introduced himself as the royal steward. The steward's voice carried a musical cadence, and he guided Leon toward a platform that ascended through layers of the palace. They reached an open chamber where a throne of interwoven crystal vines curved upward toward a skylight. On that throne sat Princess Aria. Leon had been briefed about her role as the political voice of the Empire's younger council, yet nothing had prepared him for her presence. Her form had human-like structure, though her skin shimmered with faint iridescence, and her hair flowed like strands of moonlit water. Her eyes reflected swirling patterns that changed with emotion. Aria stood with a dignified grace and welcomed him. Leon bowed slightly out of habit. She approached with calm steps and spoke with a tone that balanced authority and warmth. She stated that she appreciated his willingness to come alone, and that she respected the courage required to travel into a rival empire unarmed. Leon replied that peace was worth any discomfort, and he wished to build a bridge rather than dig a deeper trench of mistrust. Aria motioned for him to sit at a crystalline table, etched with symbols that shifted in hue as they talked. Leon presented humanity's proposal. It included neutral trade lanes, joint security zones, and cultural exchange programs designed to reduce fear and misunderstanding. Aria listened attentively, her hands folded, her gaze steady. When she spoke, her words carried a careful precision. She explained that the Kalari had long feared human unpredictability, yet they also admired human resilience. As their discussion deepened, Leon noticed subtle changes in the room's light. The Kalari palace used luminescent filaments that responded to emotional resonance. The soft glow brightened near Aria as she leaned closer, asking questions that showed genuine interest. Leon realized she was not seeking points of advantage. She was trying to understand humanity on a level far beyond military strategy. Hours passed, but the negotiation felt more like a conversation between two people searching for truth rather than victory. Aria asked about humanity's dreams. Leon asked about Kalari hopes. They discovered that both species feared losing their identity to conflict. Both wanted to protect future generations from the burden of inherited hostility. When the meeting paused for a ceremonial meal, Aria requested that Leon accompany her to the palace garden. The garden floated on a platform suspended over a glowing lake. Plants with translucent petals opened as they walked near, releasing scents that shifted from warmth to brightness depending on the surrounding mood. Aria explained that this garden represented the Empire's belief that peace would flourish only if cultivated with patience. Leon admitted that he had expected hostility or cold formality, not kindness. Aria smiled, and the petals brightened in response. She explained that the Empire had waited for a human who approached them not with bravado, but with sincerity. She then asked if he believed peace required sacrifice. Leon said yes. She asked what sacrifice he was willing to make. Leon answered honestly that he had not considered the personal cost, but he would bear any burden if it prevented young soldiers on both sides from dying for battles. They did not start. Arya studied him for several moments. Her gaze carried a depth that felt ancient yet curious. She then signaled the steward, who approached and bowed. Arya instructed him to prepare the Hall of Accord. The steward hesitated before asking if the princess was certain. She answered that tradition required decisive action, and she was prepared to honor it. Leon asked what the Hall of Accord was, expecting it to be another meeting chamber. Arya explained as they walked. In Kalari tradition, peace between rival nations required a living symbol of unity. The chosen symbol was a bond between two representatives. For centuries, the Kalari had formed alliances through ceremonial unions. It was not a political trick, but a sacred oath. If the two representatives lived in harmony, the nations would follow their example. If they failed, all agreements dissolved. Leon felt his breath catch. Arya continued speaking calmly. She said that in her assessment, he embodied the qualities the Kalari sought in a diplomatic bond. He carried humility without weakness, courage without vanity, and empathy without agenda. She believed a union between them would anchor the peace treaty more firmly than any document. Leon stopped walking. He had traveled here to discuss trade routes and demilitarized zones, not to become the husband of an alien princess. Arya paused and faced him. She clarified that this union was not forced. It required his full consent. Without it, no treaty could be sanctified through the Hall of Accord. The Empire would still negotiate, yet the treaty would remain fragile. Leon considered the implications. His mind raced with questions about culture, expectations, and the future. Arya waited patiently, her expression unreadable yet gentle. She explained that the union did not demand romantic affection, though it often grew organically. It demanded shared responsibility. They would represent peace and unity. They would live in both worlds, bridging two civilizations. Leon asked why she chose him. Arya answered with disarming simplicity. She had observed his words, posture, and reactions. His sincerity resonated with the palace itself. The palace luminescence reflected truth, and it had glowed brighter near him. She trusted the palace. She trusted her instinct. She trusted him. As the weight of the decision settled, Leon thought of the countless lives who would benefit from enduring peace. He thought of the young pilots stationed along the border. He thought of the families who feared the next flare of conflict. And he thought of Arya, who approached this heavy tradition not as a strategy, but as a genuine path to unity. Leon finally agreed. Arya placed her hand lightly against his, and the luminescent vines overhead brightened in a sweeping arc. The steward bowed deeply and guided them toward the Hall of Accord. The hall was an immense chamber shaped like a spiraling shell. Light flowed along the walls. A circular platform rose at the center. Representatives from various Kalari houses stood in attendance. They wore ceremonial robes and watched with a mixture of reverence and curiosity. Leon felt a tremor of nervousness, yet Arya's calm presence steadied him. The ceremony began with a song that seemed to vibrate through the air rather than travel through it. The sound felt warm and harmonious. Arya stepped beside Leon, and together they placed their hands on a crystalline sphere at the center of the platform. The sphere responded to their combined touch, emitting a soft pulse that radiated through the hall. Arya recited a vow in her language, her voice steady. Leon followed with a translated version provided by the steward. The vow declared mutual respect, shared purpose, and a commitment to nurture peace. When the final line echoed across the chamber, The sphere brightened and released a gentle wave of light that washed over the audience. Arya turned to Leon and stated that from this moment forward, they stood as bonded partners, not through force, but through chosen duty. The hall erupted in harmonious chimes as the guests bowed dot when the ceremony concluded. Arya guided Leon to a balcony overlooking the glowing lake. She explained that the Union granted him citizenship in the Empire. Humanity would receive the same recognition. Trade lanes would open. Military tension would dissolve. Cultural exchange programs would flourish. Their bond would mark the beginning of a new era. Leon asked how Kelari citizens would view their union. Arya smiled and said the people respected the tradition and trusted the palace's guiding resonance. They would see him as a bridge between worlds. She then added that she hoped they could build a true partnership beyond ceremony, learning from each other not only as diplomatic symbols, but as individuals. Leon felt a sense of calm. The enormity of the decision still weighed on him, yet he also sensed a profound honor. He had arrived as a negotiator. Now he stood as a partner in shaping history. As days passed, Leon adapted to palace life. Arya introduced him to scholars, artisans, and council members. He learned to read the shifting light patterns. He attended cultural rituals and shared human customs. Slowly, genuine connection replaced diplomatic formality. Arya began asking him not only about policy, but about music, food, and personal memories. He asked her about ancient stories and Kelari legends. Their conversations extended late into the evening. The bond between them grew through mutual respect. They navigated challenges together. When border extremists from both sides attempted to sabotage the treaty, Arya and Leon stood before both governments and reaffirmed their commitment. People saw their unity and reconsidered their fears. Hope replaced suspicion. Months later, a joint human vessel arrived to establish the first peace outpost. Leaders from both sides gathered. Arya and Leon stood together as symbols of change. Their intertwined hands reflected the promise they carried. The peace they forged would ripple outward for generations. Though their union began as a duty, it evolved into a friendship built on trust. Trust grew into something deeper. They no longer represented peace because tradition demanded it. They represented peace because they believed in it. Leon had been sent to negotiate peace, yet he gained more than a treaty. He found purpose, partnership, and a connection that bridged galaxies. And the galaxy changed because of it.